welcome back to another episode of the Carter Cast. I'm your host, Carter Vaughn. On today's show, we have our main man, Adam Stanco from 247 Sports on the show today. We get into the Warriors winning their fourth title in 8 years, Steph's legacy talk, and then we also get into everything about the NBA draft, the top three prospects, sleepers, busts, who we like, who we don't like. It is a phenomenal, loaded episode. And then at the very end, Connor and I talked for about 10 minutes about the Hornets situation with Kenny Atkinson accepting the job. And then on Saturday said, nah, never mind. I'm out. I'm not going to be the Hornets head coach anymore. Looking back on all parties for everyone. We get into all that. It's a phenomenal show today. One of the best ones we've ever done. Make sure to check out cartercast.com if you're not already watching it on there right now. And then be on the lookout for Grant and I's BYU Sports Podcast coming out very soon. I hope you guys enjoy the show. But before we get into today's show, we are brought to you by Pod Talk. Pod Talk is the best way to listen to podcasts. It has the best interface compared to every other podcast listening app out there. I use Pod Talk myself. Go download it right now in the App Store. Go join group discussions on your favorite podcasts like this one. Go subscribe and talk about the Carter Cast in the Carter Cast group discussion on Pod Talk right now. Download Pod Talk in the App Store today. And now here's the show. All right, we now welcome on a great friend of the show. It's our guy, Adam Stanco. Hey, man, it's been too long. How you been?
I'm good. It's so good to see you guys. I can't tell you. It's really nice. One of my favorite podcasts. So love talking to you guys.
Friend of the program. Love to friend of the program. All right, you're at 247. Talk about your job, because last time you were on, you had just started. I don't even think you were there yet. So tell us a little bit about the job. How's it been?
Yeah, it's been amazing. I mean, you're right. Last time I talked to you guys, it was right around this time last year. And I had accepted the position. Maybe I started, but I certainly hadn't moved to Nashville yet. So that's been pretty crazy, moving the whole family out here. But I will say, company's been incredible. You've got a great organization. And I didn't realize all that would be sort of encapsulated within the position. So, we have our national group, which does the recruiting that everyone knows us for: football, basketball, high school recruiting. So that's incredible. Just a great bunch of recruiting writers and analysts and all that. And then we've got our national writers, and then we have over 100 team sites, which is just incredible. A lot of partnerships there that we work with and constantly dealing with those guys. And then I came in because we're going to start our a video project, which hasn't formally been announced yet, but we're making headway towards that. So that's exciting, and that's coming. But we got a lot of really fun stuff, and we want to own college football and college basketball. That's the goal, and we think it's attainable. And having been at ESPN and NBC Sports, but it was Comcast at the time, Pac-12 Network. I've been a bunch of different places, and I know that we can do that. We can own college football and college basketball.
Talk about real quick. Talk about the humidity in Nashville. How have you adjusted? Because you were in California, right?
Yeah, but it's fine. I mean, listen, I grew up in the Northeast. I grew up outside of Philadelphia in Westchester, PA, and then spent a lot of time.
California made you soft, didn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it does. It does. It was that song, right? You live in California, but not long enough to make you soft, and live in New York, but not long enough to make you hard, the deal. And, but yeah, I've lived all over. I will say that Nashville, I mean, the weather's been great. It's been super hot this week, but the weather's been incredible here, very moderate. And the people are the nicest I think I've ever been around. I live in the Midwest, Northeast, out West, and just kind people. I love that all these people are just jamming into the city and bringing new thoughts, ideas. It's an amazing place. It's not just Broadway. I know you guys probably have spent a few nights on Broadway and got after it a little bit, but that's not been my experience as much with 4 kids. So in fact, I'll tell you, we took our kids actually yesterday. My oldest, so my kids range 18, 16, 5, and 2. And we all went out to dinner last night right off of Broadway. And my oldest daughter had gotten word that Avril Lavigne was playing at Jason Aldean's rooftop bar. So she was freaking out about it and had to go to this thing. And so we all went over. My parents are in town, so we all make our way over. And I've got, I'm holding my 5-year-old son's hand as we're walking down the street. and my wife is a few feet in front of me holding our 2-year-old, and we're making our way to this thing, which Avril Lavigne ended up having left before we got there. But this woman walks by, everyone's hammered, like waving back and forth as they're walking through. And this woman looks and she sees my wife first, and then a few feet later sees me and goes, I had never seen any children on this street before. Now I just saw 2.
I'm sure that made you feel great as a parent.
Yes, old at least, old that we were walking around with our kids. And it's a great town, though, I will say. It really is a great town.
So you're telling me the people there aren't as nice as or they're nicer than the people up here in Bristol, Connecticut? No way.
Yes. Listen, I mean, that was a second home to me. I spent almost 8 years.
Connor, choose your words wisely. Choose your words wisely.
Yeah, affiliate now.
No, there's, I mean, look, it's, I mean, you guys understand it. There's something about the Northeast. I think it's the weather that just creates this level of toughness. That's just different. But I always say like that you have some seriously long-lasting friendships and people that, I mean, there's way too many people to go through that mentored me and helped me along the way while I was at ESPN, and were awesome. You guys are going to, I mean, you'll see, Connor. It's amazing there. And I'm sure Carter's going to be visiting and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But it really is a cool place to work. It was grad school for me, and I have a lot of dear friends there. And, you know, I always say Kevin Nagandi was my wedding officiant. Dave McMiniman's like a little brother. And that's so many people behind the scenes, like so many producers and APs and people that are doing big time things now there. So, it's pretty cool. So drop my name wherever.
Oh yeah.
Go to the calf, throw my name around. It's going to get you in trouble sometimes, but sometimes they help you out here or there. So
people are telling me that I got lucky moving here in the middle of the summer and not dead winter. So I can only prepare, I guess.
You have no idea what you're in for.
Oh God.
It is brutal. Oh, also Richard Jefferson. I saw you did a little video with him the other day.
Yeah.
RJ too, from our time at Pac-12 Network together. So.
Oh yeah, he was cool.
You can tell RJ, he's the greatest. He's a great dude too. Tell him I said.
If I see him again, I'll definitely be like, yo, you know, Stanco.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Got you.
Yes.
All right. Let's talk NBA Finals. We haven't done a podcast since then. We have Stanco on now. Warriors win their 4th title in 8 years. Basically blew out Boston. That game was over in the 4th. It was just running down the clock, it seemed like. Connor, just talk about the game in your thoughts.
Yeah, so honestly, the series as a whole, it just seemed like Boston came out firing. Like I was like, oh, this is definitely going 7 games. Boston has a real chance to take this. It seems like the last couple games of the series, they kind of not gave up, but they almost ran out of gas. Like Jason Tatum wasn't hitting shots, and you were waiting for that moment like, oh, Tatum's been on a cold stretch. Like he's about to turn it on and get 40 this game, and it never came. And also on the Warriors side of things, Andrew Wiggins being the second best player on an NBA championship team, like that was shocking to me. But just the Warriors are more experienced. They've been there before. You could tell it. And I'm not sure if the Celtics just ran out of gas or if Tatum had some kind of behind the scenes injury or what it was, the lack of a true point guard. Marcus Smart's not a true point guard. But it seemed like they ran out of gas and couldn't get it done. I don't know. I always thought the Warriors were going to win, but I didn't think it would necessarily be in this fashion, kind of in a convincing 6 games.
Stanco, give me your thoughts.
I mean, I think it's a pretty good summation of what went down. I thought Boston was a tougher team, and I really thought they were going to impose their will. And defensively, they're pretty special. I mean, I think with you talk about Marcus Smart, but Jaylen Brown can defend, Tatum can defend. Obviously, Time Lord can defend. I mean, they have guys that will battle you too. And then, throw in Grant Williams. I mean, they, depth is important to them. I think that Udoka was pushing the right buttons early in the series. Got a lot out of Derek White. We saw Peyton Pritchard in stretches, but I think ultimately, I mean, obviously Steph was such a difference maker. And I know you guys want to talk about Steph and we'll get to him. Draymond Green was dreadful offensively. I mean, people talked about, still he was showing up defensively and certainly imposed his will defensively at times. But offensively, he was a mess. I mean, I think went 2 of 12 in the first game. And then I think he sort of got shell-shocked. I tweeted about it that it was almost like it was almost like what happened to Ben Simmons. Like sometimes with guys, the only 2 shots he hit, I think, was a layup and a dunk. in the first game. And like when that happens, sometimes when you just can't hit anything, it impacts you psychologically. And when that starts taking place, he wasn't then being aggressive on offense. And that's when oftentimes they're great, when he's rebounding, going downhill, and then there's all shooters around him. And so I don't know. I think ultimately it was experience. I mean, really, we saw early on, I think Boston choked a few games away. I think early on in the series, Jaylen Brown, I think, was hitting more shots than I've ever seen him make. He was an incredible shot maker, and Tatum just never really found his rhythm. You were waiting for him to show up. He was finding, I think early on in the series, you saw that he was finding other ways to impact the game, even if he wasn't scoring. And the scoring just never came for him. And I think he's going to work on, I mean, the guy is so diligent, his work ethic's incredible. And I think with more experience, it'll be great. But I mean, the East is going to be tough for the next few years. So it's going to be a battle. But ultimately, I mean, really, I think you can't talk about the series without talking about just the shot making of Steph. It was just sensational.
Yeah, that was unbelievable. You mentioned one thing, though, Draymond Green. What a ballsy move by Steve Kerr to bench Draymond. I believe it was a game 4 he did it. Because game 4 was the pivotal game of the series.
Yeah.
I think it was when they tied it 2-2. Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing is that ultimately he knew that he wasn't getting what he needed, from an offensive standpoint. And ultimately that put too much pressure on Steph. And that was, a tremendous burden. And so you don't need Draymond to shoot threes. When Draymond shooting threes, that's a possession win for the opponent every time. I mean, you just know, because anytime you got guys like Clay and Steph and Wiggins on the floor, that's a win for the defense. But he was so out of it that it was impacting him in all types of ways. And the other thing that was, we didn't mention, I mean, Jaylen Brown was making shots early on, but not only that, he was taking it to Draymond. He was being aggressive. So there was also Draymond's getting in foul trouble. He's getting teed up. Remember, there was that whole thing where he should have gotten thrown out, but then they're holding back because they knew that he already had an early tech. I mean, there was a bunch of craziness, but I think, listen, I don't think Steve Kerr gets enough credit. I think in terms of the great coaches understand their teams and what they need. And guys seem to push the right buttons because they have a feel for that kind of thing. When to bring in Iguodala, for instance, which really you could be susceptible and he could hurt you in a bunch of ways. But Steve Kerr just understands his team and knows how to talk to those guys. And he's so relaxed. I mean, a real close friend of mine is Matt Muehlbach, who's played at Arizona with Steve Kerr. They're very close. And, Muehlbach tells me stories about through the years during critical pivotal playoff games, Kerr's on his way to the arena. And you would think most coaches in those instances would be so tight and nervous. Yeah. And Kerr will call Muehlbach and talk to him about something related to golf or some joke he thought of or something he read on The Onion or something. It's just he's so loose and his team plays that way. And so not only do you have the normal experience, but you have the fact that your coach is just loosey-goosey. And I think that's been huge, much like Pop was like that and Phil and, the great coaches understand just how to settle their guys down in a way that's just special.
Harping on that Draymond Green point a little bit, you said every possession he shoots a three is a win for the opponent. And I 100% agree. It's just crazy the drop off because in 2015, 16, those battles against the Cavs, you had to guard him on the perimeter. I think he shot 39% from three that one year when they blew 3-1 lead. But he was dropping 30 points in some of those playoff games and making multiple threes a game. And just to see that drop off now, you think as a player progresses, their jump shot will get better. LeBron's jump shot has gotten better over his career. It feels like his has just gone the complete opposite direction. And I guess it's just because the Warriors don't need that.
I think to a certain extent, I also think there's certain guys that, the shooting is never something they're comfortable with. And you're right. I mean, absolutely. In that series that I was at game 7 and Draymond was going bananas from deep in that game. That's what people would be talking about to this day, as opposed to, the LeBron block. Yeah. As opposed to, that late game Kyrie 3. I mean, they'd be talking about the fact that, and of course, LeBron coming back from 3-1 and all the things that went along with that for Cleveland. But they'd be talking about how unbelievable Draymond was offensively in that game. I think that for certain players that are specialists in a way, and for him, obviously, there's so much focus and attention to detail on the defensive end. And he's exerting a ton of energy on that side of the floor, and he's setting the tone for them physically. And so I think that's where his focus is. And so I don't know how much, I mean, obviously he's working on it. There's no player in the league that's not working on certainly shooting, and especially from three. But I think for him, it's just not a part of his game that he's constantly locked in with. And I think for someone like that, it's so much easier to get into weird slumps, you know. And in a way, again, I think the Ben Simmons comparison is apt because it's the same thing. I mean, Ben Simmons doesn't worry about obviously making threes. I mean, he doesn't even shoot any, but for Ben Simmons, it's about, you know, controlling the offensive flow and getting his teammates involved offensively, attacking the rim, finishing, and then defensively, oftentimes guarding the other team's best player and being a perimeter nightmare. And same thing for Draymond. Like, guys are focused on locking down the other end. And I think that's why it's so hard to be a great two-way player in the league, because it's just, it requires so much mentally. I think you bring up a really good point.
One thing I did want to touch on, Connor, you talked about it a little earlier, is Tatum. I mean, obviously he didn't look right. I don't know if it was just he ran out of gas. I was like, I texted Connor about this constantly. I constantly thought that right after the playoffs ended, right after Game 6 ended, we were going to see him in a cast at the press conference, just like LeBron after they got swept. I where does Tatum go from here? Because like it's going to be a dark summer for him, because he's going to read social media. He's going to see all the TV headlines. Tatum couldn't do it. Tatum fell short. He can't be that guy on the biggest stage. Where does he go from here? Do you think it hurts him next year? Or because it always feels like whenever a team loses a championship, there's that championship hangover, especially in football, but sometimes in basketball as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's so tough to get back there. I mean, the guys in the league will tell you that it's
especially with Giannis now in the Eastern Conference, if they're healthy.
Yeah. I mean, it's a battle, but the idea, knowing that you've got just so far to go. I mean, that the season extends so deep, and you know, the playoffs are months long. I mean, that's the part that I think is just so difficult for guys is again, psychologically, that people don't talk about that enough. I think as it relates to the game, is that it's going to impact you for such a long period of time. And to your point, yeah, these guys work so hard over the summer, and his work ethic is insane. He's really, I mean, people were giving him a hard time about the Kobe stuff, but he really has spent a lot of time, you know, try to learn from Kobe, and they both came into the league at a really young age. And I love Tatum's maturity. I love his patience on the floor. I love the fact that, you know, he works his tail off. He improves different aspects of the game. I love that he's a two-way player. So I actually think he's going to be great. I think this is going to really motivate him. It is very difficult to get to the finals and lose and then say, all right, we need to get back there. But also, if you look historically, so many great NBA teams, if they truly were great, if they had a young core, it's oftentimes about making that next step and finally getting over the hump and beating a team. And we used to see this all the time before guys traded teams so often, but you know, you would see like the Pistons couldn't overcome the Celtics. You know, it was always difficult for them. And then, you know, meanwhile, in the late 80s, early 90s, they end up winning a couple titles there. And then the Bulls couldn't get back past the Pistons. And finally they get over that hump. And then, you know, they turn into this dynasty team. And so I think in some way, like if that core stays together, that Tatum Brown, which has been talked about, you know, splitting it up, but Marcus Smart wants to be a part of that too. And it feels like the other guys really want to buy into what they're doing right now. I think that actually this could be a team that really, you know, they build some resolve around this. And I think Tatum most notably. So I think it'll be a dark summer, but I think it'll be a motivational summer. He's still such a young guy, and yeah, he'll read.
Yeah, he's 19.
This. I was going to say, for a 17-year-old to make the finals, that's crazy. I'm just kidding.
But no, I think it is incredible that the guy has, you know, he's come so far. I mean, listen, maybe I'm biased on some level because I was a Tatum guy. Look at my pinned tweet right now on Twitter, and I was saying Tatum should have been the number one pick in that year's draft. Everyone's talking about Ball and Fultz, and I was out, you know, with the Pac-12 guys. I was like, you're picking the wrong guy here. So I've been on Tatum for a long time, but I think he'll be just fine. I really do, and I think he's gonna be motivated. But you never know. I mean, between injuries and then, you know, how good the East can be, and who knows what's going to happen with the Nets and, you know, Sixers. It's going to be tough, man. It's an uphill battle. Bucks, Heat. I mean, it's insane in the East.
Hornets. No,
Hornets. I didn't even mention the Hornets.
One thing that bothers me with the Celtics, though, is like, so Marcus Smart, Defensive Player of the Year, So he's going to start, obviously. Jaylen Brown's going to start. Jason Tatum's going to start. It's hard for me to see those three starting at the 1 through 3 positions and then taking that next step. But, like, you can't bench the defensive player of the year, can you? And bring in, a veteran point guard like a Derek White to run the offense? Because it feels like that's what they were missing. But then you have Marcus Smart, who's defensive player of the year. You can't really – they're in kind of a tough spot. You know? Yeah. They have too many guys that play almost the same position.
But and listen, I agree. I think it's shooting is the big thing for them. I think that you're right. I think it's almost a choosing, and this happens to a lot of teams. It's like choosing between offense and defense. Yep. And Marcus Smart. So that's why when he's hitting shots and he's confident, I mean, they are so tough to beat because they're just already going to be tough defensively. And same thing with Jaylen Brown. And that was the big difference. The first 3 games, you saw confident, offensive Jaylen Brown hitting was out of his mind. But the fact that Marcus Smart is hitting open shots and all of a sudden it's like, all right, well, now they can play all those guys together. But you're right. When Jaylen Brown's not shooting from the outside, his handle's shaky. And then, Jaylen Brown was a 29% 3-point shooter his freshman year at Cal, goes to the league. I never thought that he would turn it around. And he really has developed a really nice offensive game, continues to develop. But that is what they need because in today's league, you have to have at least 3 guys that can shoot from the outside. Yeah. And so if Tatum's not hitting shots and now Jaylen Brown's inconsistent, now your offense is coming from Marcus Smart. You're right. Now all of a sudden you have to play Derek White. You have to play Peyton Pritchard. And that is a or you're relying on Al Horford.
I was about to say when Al Horford's your best shooter, then,
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
You mentioned this, Connor, with Derek White. Derek White looked lost after game 3. The last 3 games of the series, deer in the headlights, scared puppy, just wanted to get on the bench, it looked like.
You can attribute that to maybe him getting there late in the year and not being acclimated, but he had flashes throughout the playoffs of
game 1, he hit like 7 threes.
Because I was like, this is exactly what Boston needed, a point guard to come off the bench, play 25 minutes, score double figures. But then he was literally 0 for in the last few games, which I thought was kind of crazy. I don't know. I guess in San Antonio, he never really played at a really high level. Like, he obviously never made the finals. So maybe that. But I don't know. Like, people are like, oh, the Celtics need a veteran point guard. Derek White's not a veteran, but he kind of fits the bill of what people say the Celtics need. I don't know. It's a weird situation.
Let's move on to what's important. Steph's legacy. Everything. This should all be about Steph. We shouldn't even be talking about anybody else other than him because he should be. This should have been his second Finals MVP. We all know that. Where does this put him legacy wise? I'll go first. My initial thing, I thought he passed Kobe. I still think he's right behind Kobe. I think he's probably top 10 then.
If you're saying he's behind Kobe, he can't be top 10
is Kobe not top 10?
I don't know. He's probably top 10, but I don't know if both of them can be in the top 10 because then who are you kicking out? Then you're kicking out guys like Bill Russell, which obviously I didn't watch Bill Russell play, but won 11 championships even back then. I feel like there's something to be said for that. Or somebody like Wilt, he's got to be top 10, right? Who are you kicking out?
Hakeem, Shaq.
I don't think Hakeem's in the top 10. I don't know. It's a tough argument.
It's tough. That's the whole thing. To me, the interesting part is almost even how you begin to break down legacy is always so tough. To your point, to compare a guy like Will, who in his day was so unstoppable and his records are never going to be broken. You count them in terms of his scoring average in a season, rebounds. Then he decided I want to average a bunch of it. I want to lead the league in assists. So he's doing that one year. And was a freak show as an athlete. Then Shaq is the most dominant player that I've ever seen in my life. And you're right. You start talking about Kobe and just how special Kobe was, and obviously LeBron's run. All that being said, I'm just happy for Steph. I think is the most important part. Is that you're right, deserved an MVP previously. I think that there's no question about that. And so now you're already talking about a guy with 4 rings. He's got 2 MVPs. He's got a unanimous MVP, and most notably, he's changed the game for the next generation. And when you change the dimensions on the floor, it's remarkable. And he's not just a shooter. He's the greatest shooter of all time. I don't think there's an argument to be said as far as that's concerned. His 3-point records are also, I don't know if they're ever going to be broken, maybe because we may see a different style of play as time moves on. But I just think what he has done in terms of changed actually the geometry on the floor, it's incredible. I mean, we were mentioned before, right? The Celtics, the idea in basketball that if you can have 3 guys on the floor, you always need 3 shooters to space the floor. And in the NBA, spacing, anyone who goes to an NBA game and sits up close understands how important spacing is. The floor looks big when you're watching on TV, and then you see how big those dudes are. And when you're in person, I mean, even a college game for you guys, I mean, I know seeing a bunch of college games, same thing. Like you get there, you're like, wow, there is not a lot of room to operate. And so the fact that now all of a sudden when a guy's shooting 30, 35 footers, like it's nothing, and now his defender has to come out, all of a sudden, if the whole challenge in the game is dealing with spacing, and you now create, instead of 5-on-5, 20 feet and in, it's 4-on-4, you just gave your team such a gigantic advantage. And so everyone always talks about the Warriors ball movement and how he runs through screens and all that. And absolutely, I agree with all those points. And, Klay Thompson's such a brilliant shooter too. But I think to me, what makes him so incredible is just how he's just changed the dimensions of the game in a way that we never saw before. Just like, all of a sudden Kareem changes the game and there's the rules that are put in place for how Wilt played. And you start talking about not being able to dunk. And there's all these rules that you have to put in place because of dominant players and stuff, hand check rules, because it's just remarkable to me that Steph has changed the game in such a way that, I don't know that it's ever turning back around again. And so that's to me what his legacy is going to be. And so you can make the argument, you can put him top 10, top 5 if you want to, because of some of the things he's done. I don't know that I would say that, but I think at the same time, like, I don't know, we've never seen anyone else like him. And I think that's the greatest compliment you can give a player.
Yeah. A couple things on Steph though, because when you look at like the top 20 guys, he's like the only 6'2" guard. He's the only guard, which is unbelievable. Everybody else is 6'6" or way taller. And then the other thing with Steph, you mentioned like seeing him win, like how happy you were for Steph. It's impossible not to root for the guy. And I think that's why like so many people support him. And it's just so pure watching him play, and like everything about his game is just so pure.
I could not agree more with all that stuff. I mean, he, to me, embodies what we want all of our guys to be. Like he's legitimate. He believes in himself. And we all know the story in terms of him being an underdog and getting recruited by schools like High Point and all that kind of stuff. And,
shout out High Point.
Yeah. And Connor, I think VCU is, but Connor, you're going to run into Seth Greenberg there on campus. And I've talked to Seth, he's a friend of mine too. And he had, we talked about it, and he's like, look, we had a crazy loaded team. No one actually had him ranked that high as a recruit coming up. And he's like, we offered him a spot to walk on because of our current situation. They have basically NBA guards on the Virginia Tech team. And and look, he gets crushed for it. And he's like, look, we were actually recruiting him and trying to give him a spot on the team. And the joke is, as you guys with ties to, the Duke program, I know you guys go back and forth about Duke, but the funny part about it was everyone makes fun of Seth Greenberg and Virginia Tech for not recruiting Steph. And then here comes Seth Curry, and he's under recruited too, ends up at Liberty, and then transfers to Duke. So it's like everyone that was talking about that still, when it's right in front of their face again, and not to say that Seth is Steph, but he's obviously carved out a really good NBA career himself. And but you're right. I just think in terms of the personality, everybody loves him. And look, I grew up as a huge Isaiah Thomas fan, and you guys obviously didn't get a chance to watch him live as much, but for me, I mean, Isaiah was a killer. I mean, winning back-to-back titles during a stretch in which he wins 2 titles during a stretch in which Jordan's playing, Bird's playing, Magic's playing, is sort of the forgotten man. And it's sort of the same thing with Steph, is that he's winning these titles when there's all these other greats that we're going to talk about when the game is said and done. LeBron and
Steve Nash.
Durant and what's that?
Steve Nash,
yeah.
Probably top 2 or 3 all time.
Sure.
One in my book.
Steve Nash, MVP, you got to give him credit.
Two-time.
Yep, 2-time MVP. I mean, but I do think though, when you play it out, it's like we're going to look back at the game, and it's Steph is going to be one of those guys, and Isaiah Thomas was sort of the same way, that it's going to be really hard to explain to people that weren't around to watch him play. And this is with all great players, probably. It's just going to be tough when it's your kids and your grandkids and trying to say like, no, this is why Steph was so great. You had to sort of see it to believe it. And they'll be like, no, but Kevin Durant was better because look how much taller he was. And Giannis was dominant and all that. It's sort of the same thing like that we talk about. It's like, no, this dude was so special. And I think it goes to show with the rings and now obviously the finals MVP.
That's my problem talking to people about Steve Nash. They don't understand his true greatness. They just think he's this crappy Brooklyn Nets head coach.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, he's the greatest point guard in NBA history.
He is a great point guard.
I will say, I was working First Take the other day, and Kendrick Perkins made the argument that Steph Curry is now on his Mount Rushmore of NBA players of all time. I think that's kind of a stretch. Now, I know the whole but
the problem is, how do you define a Mount Rushmore then?
I guess
it's like impact on the game, then yes, but
you're
just
like
top 5
players,
top 4 or 5.
I don't know. I mean, there's not going to be like a definite answer. I feel like as the years go on, there's going to be more and more people to break records and get in this conversation. And then, people are going to be like, what about this generation or that generation? It's hard to compare people from different times of the game because, people can say, oh, Michael Jordan played against plumbers and make all those jokes. But who's to say like what he would be if he started playing in like 2010? Like nobody knows.
Well, the thing about, look, when it comes to like the MJ argument, and I've had conversations with PJ Carlissimo about this, Don McClain, guys that, Don has draft associations, which I'll tell you, but like PJ Carlissimo is still so close to the game now, still so heavily involved, but coached him with the dream team, Jordan in 92. Don McClain now was most improved player his second year in the league, Pac-12's all-time leading scorer. But Don now works out all the CAA guys prior to the draft. So he's working out guys pre-draft and all. So he is constantly around like the next generation and stuff. And those guys will talk to you all day long about how special Jordan was. And this is sort of the point, I guess. And I think it does tie back into the Steph argument is that like, unless you're there to see it and understand the impact on the game, what's going to happen as time's going to go on is you're going to be arguing with your kids and your grandkids, like I said, and they're going to say to you like, yeah, but Steph was tiny. He could never hang with guys like this and the greats of today, whoever that next generation of great player is. And maybe we'll find him in this year's draft. But it's like, no, those guys are bigger and stronger and faster. And it's the same argument that gets made about like Larry Bird and stuff. And it's like, no, by the way, those same arguments were made when Steph was entering the league, just like when Larry Bird entered the league, like the same thing with Jordan. It was, he shoots too much, all the same thing people want to argue. Trust me, pundits were making those arguments when those guys entered the league, and then they made their mark, dominated the competition, did the only thing they could do, dominated in every facet. And then it's up to guys like us to say later, like, this is where we'd rank you on this imaginary list or a carved statue, as Kendrick Perkins is pointing out. So
that's the thing you talk about. Like later on, we'll have to tell people you just had to watch Steph. I experienced the same thing every time I call my dad talking basketball because he's like, you just had to see John Stockton. It makes no sense to me because John Stockton is just a short dude wearing short shorts. No, like I don't see the athleticism. And dudes like Chris, almost a better version of Chris Paul.
Look, listen, if you want, the only thing you have to make in terms of a Stockton argument is just look at the record book right now. All-time assists. I mean, the guy's got 15,000 assists. And then look at that he's got the steals record too. I mean, it's bananas though. How many assists he is up above the competition. I think there's only two other guys with 10,000 assists or something. I mean, it's just crazy and how consistent that guy was, and how tough he was. And look, the only thing you can do when you start to compare, you can only talk about how dominant a guy was in his particular era. You can only play the guys in his era. And then from there, it's how dominant they were and just talk to those players. And by the way, anyone who knows anything about evolution, like guys this is why the argument's impossible. Because guys today we understand, physiology more and science has evolved and technology and all those things. So your equipment's better, your training's better, what you're taught is better. But the other part is that like what you're trained to do and how offenses are run and everything that people are trying to accomplish is different. I mean, people talk about the 80s and 90s being so tough. Like a big part of that was coaches understood that if you slow a game down and make it a rock fight, you have a better chance of staying on as a coach. If you're losing games like the Nuggets used to lose, like, 130 to 115, like it looks like, well, you guys don't play. Everyone judges it. Like, how do you play defense? Are you guys tough? And that was the thought. That was the mentality. So when teams they'd lose games that way, coaches would get fired and all that. So a lot of these coaches would lose games 92 to 86, 88 to 84. And you're like, oh, well, look how hard we're playing and we're competitive. But part of that was slowing possessions down and all those kinds of things. So that's, again, where it's like, it's just so hard to compare errors. A lot of these great, like Jordan didn't shoot threes. I mean, he hit 6 threes in that against the Blazers in the finals, but that wasn't something that he was trying to work on during the offseason. If he was playing today, that absolutely would be part of his game. And then you start talking about the rules change with hand checking and what you're able to do, block charge, just how they call things is just so differently now. And so there was also the physical threat of a fight. Like, that was the other part. Like, you had guys on your Anthony Mason, Charles Oakley would take you out if you tried to, get in the way of a great player. And you don't have that as much anymore.
Yeah.
So I love comparing eras because things are so different, but I think it's impossible. We'll never get these answers, which is probably why it makes for a good argument. So
I agree.
Exactly. Let's take a quick break and then we'll get into the NBA draft. All right, let's run through the NBA draft real quick. I'll start off with this question. Stanco, you start out first. If you're the GM of the Orlando Magic, who do you take at 1? You can't trade out. Come on, you have a guy. I know you do.
I mean, I might go Jaden Ivey. Yeah.
He's going 5.
Mm-hmm. I love Jaden Ivey. Saw him work out last offseason. He's incredible, man. The kid's incredible. He works his tail off. I saw him working out last offseason with Davion Mitchell, Keon Johnson, and more than holding his own, was just absolutely impressive in terms of his explosiveness, his development, his love for the game. Last time I saw a guy in a gym that I was that impressed with, I think, was Donovan Mitchell. Prior to his draft, just there's a presence about him that's special. I really like Chet Holmgren, I will say. Chet is such a unique prospect, obviously. I think the potential's there. I think it's going to take him a few years. There's no doubt. You're not going to get the production year 1 that you would out of Chet. I would say Paolo. I'm a little worried about Paolo's work ethic. I'm hearing some things from people that may not be that mentally as tough as I would expect the kid to be. I love him as a prospect, though. So sometimes that happens with younger guys. They don't want to put in the work. If he does, he could end up as I think the best player in this draft. I really love Paolo's potential. And Jabari Smith, I mean, this is why it's so tough here to me. And I put all 4 of those guys there is because guys just don't shoot it like that at that size. And he fits the prototype of everything you want to talk about when you're talking about an NBA player, an NBA superstar. Someone the other day said, what makes a great NBA player? And Kevin on Twitter, and Kevin Durant was saying, like, positional length, positional size, ability to shoot the ball. And he was obviously talking about himself, but he's referring to all, which by the way is fair. I mean, everything he's saying, he is a prototype of what you'd want. And Jabari Smith fits that stuff. He still needs to tighten up on his handle. There's things I want to see in terms of his passing ability, locking down guys defensively, dominating games. But all those guys have the potential to be truly special.
Anyway, so if I can't trade the pick, if I'm picking number 1 overall, I think I don't think I'm taking Paolo. Like, he's the most NBA ready, but he's also I feel like Jabari Smith and Chet Holmgren have more potential to be great. Like, Paolo has a higher floor, but they have a higher ceiling, in my opinion. So I don't know. I think I'm going to take Chet first and just risk it. Like, I know maybe there's a little PTSD, like they tried to do the Mo Bamba thing that didn't work out. But I think there's too much there that's if Chet Holmgren does turn out to be this amped up version of Porzingis, where he can shoot 38% from 3 and average 3 blocks a game and average double-double, whatever, and they pass on him and he becomes some kind of generational talent, that's too big of a risk and they would be kicking themselves. Even if he turns out to not be that good, at least, I think it's the risk worth taking. So if I had to choose, I'm going there, even though I think right now Paulo's game is the most NBA ready from day 1.
I mean, you just said it. He's the most NBA ready from day 1. It's Paolo. I know I'm wearing the Duke shirt, whatever, say what you want, but it's Paolo. He's the most NBA ready. We heard you talked about you love Jason Tatum over Markelle Fultz and Lonzo Ball. Every single person said in that draft, Jason Tatum's the most pro-ready guy, but you got to take the potential with Fultz and Ball. I feel the same way with Banchero. I think Banchero is the most pro-ready guy. I just don't see a world he averages less than 16 in his rookie year. I just think he's going to come in and assert his dominance and just show why he was the best player in this draft. He's the one I feel the most comfortable with. Yeah, and it's obvious because I've watched the most Duke games, obviously. I'm not watching Auburn every single night. I watched almost all the Gonzaga games, but Chet is just way too much of a risk there for me.
Here's what I'd say about those points. The biggest factor in seeing guys in pre-draft workouts is they have to have a love for the game, and they have to want to put the work in. You have to. I saw Jordan Poole pre-draft, and it was same thing. Like, he just had an energy in the gym and all that kind of stuff. Now, listen, got in a great situation. Team gave him confidence. Continued to work on his game when he got to the league. But, being in a really good spot where, Kerr plays rookies, even during successful seasons. He's willing to mix guys in so that he can get their confidence up. Not every coach is going to do that. So you need the right situation. But I think in terms of putting that work in, that is a critical step to me. And the thing with Chet, it's interesting. I think a lot of people make the mistake in assuming that they just think that he's like not tough enough or even not strong enough for where he's at right now, which obviously that's clear too. But I think a lot of it was his fitness. Like, I don't think that he was actually in the best shape. And that's something that you can absolutely work on. I mean, the guy was playing less than 30 minutes a night, but we saw what he did in terms of his ability to finish. You see defensively that he's just a total game changer. I mean, at worst, he's going to be one of the most impactful defensive players in the league. That's at worst. So then you go a step up and say, all right, second worst is he's an absolutely impactful defensive player, and he's going to hit outside shots for you. But then you realize the guy can handle it, create his own offense, and then sky's the limit, and he's going to get stronger. That's the thing to me that's got me so excited. And Chet's like, he's kind of crazy in the sense, he was asked the question, I don't know, you guys saw a few weeks ago. They said, who's the best player in the NBA? He's like, me, and in a few months. It's like, okay, Chet. But in some way, he kind of believes that too. So I don't know. He's a different dude for sure. He's a different dude.
Okay, talk to me about Keegan Murray at 4. Chris Haynes tweeted out today, it almost seems like a lock at Keegan Murray at 4. It doesn't make as much sense to me because, I feel like you kind of want I think Jaden Ivey's the 4th best player in this draft. I know the fit doesn't make as much sense with De'Aaron Fox, but I still think you take best available, no matter if you're a bad team.
But you got to factor in if you want to be there or not. Like, Jaden Ivey doesn't sound like he's hyped up to be in Sacramento, which
is also true.
Yeah.
So from what I know about this situation, which I actually do know some, that there just hasn't been interest from the Kings, and Ivey's understood. Again, he's working out with, like I told you guys earlier, my guy Don McClain. So he was there last offseason. He's there again this session, and AJ Griffin's there as well. But here's the thing is that, like, Jaden Ivey understands from the guys that have been there before and the CAA crew that, he's being rep by, that he just wants the best possible spot for him. He would like to play with Cade Cunningham. I know that at 5. He'd actually be really happy in Detroit and thinks there's a bright future. I mean, you think about Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Sadiq Bey. I mean, there's a lot of reason to be excited.
Even Bagley turned it up this year.
Yeah, exactly. And Isaiah Stewart. I mean, there's a lot of reason to be excited about all of a sudden the core that's being developed in Detroit. But I think, so it's almost like this weird situation where Ivey's not going to go top 4 we're not going to see Ivey go top 4 unless the team trades up into the top 4 to specifically get him, but he's worthy of going 4. So the Kings are not going to take him at 4. I think that's been established. I think you're right. Keegan Murray seems like that's the guy that they're targeting there. I think Keegan Murray can turn out to be a really good player. I think he's solid in a lot of ways. There's a lot that I like about Keegan Murray, but in terms of this draft, I think to me, it comes down to NBA teams slot guys into tiers. So you have your tier 1, tier 2, you go on down the list, and tier 1 guys are face of the franchise, multiple time All-Stars, all that kind of thing. And when NBA teams look at this draft, at least as far as I'm slotting it out, I think you have 4 tier 1 guys. I really do. I think 4 guys are going to be face of the franchise, superstar potential. And again, we don't know the work ethic of Paolo. We don't know about Jabari Smith, Chet Holmgren. All those guys have question marks about who are they. We know that Paolo is going to have the highest production first year. I think that's almost a given. But and I'd say Jaden Ivey has a potential too. But I think ultimately it comes down to how hard do those guys work? What are their situations? What's their confidence like? All that's, can they stay healthy? Yep. If all those things play out and they all put in the effort, I think those guys all end up becoming tier 1 guys. But I think the drop off from those 4 is tremendous as you start to move down. And the only other guy that I would put in the conversation, honestly, in this whole draft is Ben Mathurin. Like, I think he's a guy that has just crazy talent, can shoot it from the outside, incredibly explosive. There's still part of his mid-range game that I want to see that now is a huge part of the league because so many guys overcommit to the 3.
Yep.
But the fact that he can shoot it like he can, and then he'll dunk on you too, is perfect for today's NBA. Some of the guys I know in Pac-12 are like, oh, we see Dwayne Wade comparisons. I'm like, no, Dwayne Wade was all about mid-range and finding different ways to make shots and all that. Mathurin needs to learn sort of that in-between game and to score on that second level. But I think that he, to me, is the other guy that just has just crazy, crazy potential.
The last question I had on the draft is I wanted to get your opinion on Jeremy Sohan, because I've seen him anywhere from 8 through the late lottery, which I think is crazy. I watched a little bit of Baylor this year. Obviously watched that Carolina Baylor game, which was horrible, but at the end, but I think he's too high. I just didn't see it with him. He shot sub 30% from 3, and a lot of mock drafts have him going to Charlotte, which I personally would hate. So what's your opinion on that? You think he's too high?
I do think he's too high. Here's the weird part that ends up happening with kids like this. I feel like that they've been scouted in other ways. And look, I say this about whether it's the international scene or the high school scene, so many of these one and done guys now, the NBA guys have seen them beforehand and made judgments in a good way prior to this, because really what you're seeing a lot of times on the high school circuit, and I've talked about this, is the idea that you'll see a guy when he's not restricted in terms of his overall potential. In college, coaches become so much more restrictive in that they won't allow guys to play different roles. So all of a sudden you see a guy like from what I'm hearing from my buddy, he's seeing AJ Griffin create his own shot. He's seeing that AJ Griffin's got a handle on him. It's not just catch and shoot, but when he's at Duke, that's what he's being asked to do. When Devin Booker was at Kentucky, he was asked to catch and shoot. Karl Anthony Towns is asked to rim run, and you didn't see that all around game and all this potential. And so oftentimes it's really hard for us as evaluators, and I say us, the 3 of us here, because we're seeing a prospect in certain environment. And that doesn't mean necessarily they'll shine if given the other opportunities. Some kids will, some won't. It's, do they have it in them, and can they actually perform on that level at the NBA stage? But the best way to tell that is actually, all right, if they're playing free, which oftentimes happens AAU over the summer on their high school team, what is their potential if given everything equal and they're just allowed to just be themselves? And I think that's sometimes what guys are going off of, and that's where you see certain prospects get evaluated pretty highly. The only thing to me is it's also a huge risk when you start to look at guys that way and say, okay, we didn't see productivity this year. But really what happens is a lot of front office personnel are egomaniacs. And I mean, look, we all are in all industries, and certainly in TV and the podcasting industry. We all have big egos. And really what happens is, though, these front office guys say, well, if I get this kid, I can turn him into this type of player. And sometimes you see that and you see it play out, and then they can laugh at the other GMs. And other times it flames out. And actually, in some ways, it's easier for GMs too, in terms of their risk, because they can say, oh yeah, well, the kid didn't perform like we thought he would. It's well, yeah, but he also showed you no productivity in college. So, that's on you. So, but you do see these cases quite a bit. Who's the kid that played, for the Spurs why am I drawing a blank?
Josh Primo?
Yeah. So Primo was that case, there's potential, and people started seeing stuff in the pre-draft process, and they said, man, he's a young prospect. And that's the other thing too. The number one, I tell people this all the time, they don't understand, is that the number one metric that NBA teams look at is age. You guys were joking about Tatum earlier, but the age goes above all else, not how many points a guy averaged in college, whatever. If NBA teams see a kid that's 16 years old and was, somehow found a way to, 17 years old in the draft, the youngest possible prospect, that's who gets in the conversation for number one. They love that idea, even though you still have to decide in 3 years whether you're going to re-sign a guy, and commit to him for the long term. So it's interesting when it plays out that way.
All right, we know we're running out of time. Quick fire, last 2 questions. Give us a sleeper of the draft and then your biggest bust of the draft.
Oof. All right. Listen, it's probably the most popular sleeper pick now because he built up a lot of attention over the last month or so. But I'd say Kenneth Lofton, if he ends up getting drafted, I think that you're talking about a guy that there's something about him that feels like his body type does not look like it's normal in the league, but he also understands that. He understands how to take advantage of that. He's been extremely successful internationally. He's incredibly confident. He showed he could shoot from the outside. He just understands how to play. And I just think guys like that, I don't know that we'll even see him drafted, but I think to me, he ends up being when all is said and done, it was sort of like, wait, we all sort of felt this way about the kid. Like, why wasn't that the case? So to me, he ends up being, I think, the steal of the draft. Man. And now you guys are asking biggest bust?
Because ours is so handed, it's not even close.
Yeah, that's my biggest bust. My biggest steal is either Patrick Baldwin or maybe this is a popular one, Jake LaRavia. Only if he goes in the second round. Because I've seen mock drafts happen like mid-20s. That's too high.
Well, I don't think second round matters. I think it's just he has to go to the right situation. If he's like in a Warriors type culture kind of thing, he's going to succeed. But if he goes to the Wizards, he's going to be out of the league.
Fair. Listen, I think you guys may be right about Jeremy. That does feel like the pick, doesn't it?
It just feels wrong to me. And that could be just coming from a Carolina fan and seeing that tournament game and just getting so mad, but I don't know.
No, I think you guys might be right. I think that
Shaedon Sharpe is the biggest question mark.
Shaedon Sharpe certainly is, but you know what? Like I said, look, and here's the thing. When it comes to this draft, if I was, the popular question is like you guys asked at the top, I'd be asking the same thing. Is, hey, if you have the number 1 pick, who are you taking? But to me, the really interesting question is, like, what would you be willing to give up in this draft to get to 4 or maybe even 5, like if you really believe in Mathurin like I do? And if you don't get there, then to me, it's about why not swing for the fences? Like, sort of what you're going to get with Keegan Murray, AJ Griffin. I'm going off of the fact Don told me the story too. Which I'll again repeat because this is where these types of things you don't hear about. And so as a Duke guy, you'll appreciate this. I'll leave you with this story about AJ Griffin. So Don told me they work out with the kids for about 6 weeks. Whenever their college season ends, they go to Don preparing them for team workouts. And that's the process. And he's had everybody. Karl Anthony Towns, Devin Booker, D'Angelo Russell, like I said, Donovan Mitchell, the list goes just on and on and on. But he's had so many great players through the years. And he told me that in doing this for almost 2 decades, he has never had this happen. When they finished up the session, Griffin went to him and they're working out hard. I mean, it's physically on their bodies, like strength training, core, all that kind of stuff is part of the day. And then hours of basketball work. Guys have never worked that hard. At Duke, Michigan State, doesn't matter. They've never worked that hard, and they're all prepared just to try to make, if you move up a few slots, you just made a few more million. So that's the whole process, and just getting them prepared for teamwork and then for summer league. Anyway, Griffin comes up to Don at the end of the session and says, "Hey, Don, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it. What's your address?" And Don's like, what do you need my address for? He's like, "Oh, I want to send you a gift to say thank you for the work that you put in for me." And Don said he had never had a kid do that in all the time. And he's got kids that he loves. His all-time favorite was Donovan Mitchell, and he loved Kobe White too last year or a couple of years ago. But here's the thing though, is that Don said, he goes, "AJ, you don't have to send me a gift. I'm not doing that. You're not going to send me a gift." He goes, "But what I will do is tell every NBA team that you asked to do that, because that's going to matter to them, because they want guys like that." And what's really interesting, and people don't realize, we talk about the work ethic, you talk about the passion for the game. The other thing that makes guys successful is what kind of guy are they in the locker room, and do teammates want to be around them? Are they good chemistry guys? And that's the number one thing that's changed in the last few years. A lot of people don't know is that from the combine, people say, is it still worth it? Why do guys go if they're not working out or they're not testing? Is the interviews now are the most important part of the combine, because people want to know, oh, that's a different dude. Like Jaden Ivey is a legit guy. AJ Griffin is a legit guy. And that matters to teams. And that's the one piece of information sometimes that we're not privy to. I want to see Mark Williams make it too, by the way. Would you guys be happy if he ended up in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Even as a Carolina fan, yes.
If we don't trade for Miles Turner, it's Mark Williams. I think that's like the lock of the draft.
Yeah.
I agree.
Every reporter's like Mark Williams to the Hornets, even though we don't have the head coach, but that's for a different time. We've already taken too much of your time. Adam, thanks again for coming on. You got to come on way more often now.
Always welcome.
Well, appreciate it, guys. It's good. This was worth getting my wife mad at me.
Tell her from the Carter Cast, we send our sincerest apologies. And if you want to give your address, we'll send you a gift.
Yeah, we'll send you a gift.
For the time. So.
Costco flowers are on the way.
No, it's the only way to end this. No, I appreciate you guys. I always have a blast coming on. You guys do great work. And I think you both know, if you ever need me, you can reach out. And I still owe Carter a night out in Nashville. So we got to make that happen. You guys come down and let's make it happen.
Awesome, man. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, real quick, thank you to our guy, Adam Stanco, again. Had a blast with him. But Connor and I have not talked since the whole debacle of the Charlotte Hornets. Kenny Atkinson accepts the job, and then right after the finals, a couple days after, Woj tweets out, Atkinson will not be the Hornets head coach. He's backed out of the job. I don't even know what like to think, because like it looks bad on like every part. It looks bad on Atkinson, and it looks awful on the Hornets as well.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a lot of bad PR for Charlotte. And the thing is, I read an article where it was like Atkinson already had made plans to meet with each person on the Hornets coaching staff, the week after the championship. Like he'd already made all these plans. So he was 100% in to be the coach. It wasn't just like, oh, he's considering it. No, he had accepted the job and they'd come to terms, but they had never signed, obviously. I would have been less mad if Kenny Atkinson went through the interview process and then maybe at the very end when they were like about to make a final decision, then he would have been like, I think Golden State's the place for me. But to accept the job and have Charlotte tell these other candidates, hey, you're not the guy anymore, and then to back out. So now Charlotte has to go back begging to these guys, hey, Mike D'Antoni, hey, Terry Stotts, I know we just said you're not our first choice, but can you please come coach the team, even though we just said we didn't want you? That's horrible. Like the timing's horrible, and it just looks bad. It almost looks like the coaching job in Charlotte is not as attractive as it actually is. Because if you look at this roster up and down, they're built for the future. They're built for the playoffs, it seems like. They're going to make a playoff run. It seems like an attractive job, but now after this, there's going to be a lot of negative connotations around it. So it's just a bad situation all around.
Exactly. They said family matters, and like the Steve Kerr interview seemed like he talked about like his kids are teenagers and they don't want to go out there and stuff.
He didn't want to consider that first.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's the thing. Like you go for that job, and then you finally like get the job. Like you can't go for that job without having that conversation first. Be like, hey guys, would you be cool moving to Charlotte?
Yeah.
Like,
I agree completely.
You can't have that. That's awful PR on him. It looks awful on the Hornets because it just means we're still the Charlotte Bobcats. You can change the name, but you are what you are on the inside.
Yeah, exactly. And the organization's still the same. And people are calling like Michael Jordan, they're putting this on him. I mean, how could anybody in the defense of the Hornets, how could anybody within the Hornets organization know that this was going to happen? Because I do think
because that's the thing. Also, all the Hornets staff found out on Twitter from Woj.
Exactly. And the thing with me is I'm thinking like out of the three finalists, like you can make an argument for D'Antoni or Stotts, sure. Overall, Atkinson was probably the best hire. And I was a little, I thought it sounded Borrego-ish to me. But all in all, Kenny Atkinson was a good coach. And I wasn't that mad over it. I was like, okay, this could be really positive. But now it's just in shambles.
Yep. By the time, like the day before that Friday, like after the Celtics or the Warriors beat the Celtics, win their title, at that point, every Hornets fan at that point was comfortable. And they're like, Atkinson's our guy. We're rolling with it. He's won a title. He's got that championship pedigree now. Like, he's our guy. And then you just get cock blocked right in the face the next day with Atkinson decides he's no longer coaching the Hornets. And I don't know what the Hornets do from here, because if you're Mike D'Antoni, you mentioned it before, like Mike D'Antoni, Terry Stotts, like, why? I mean, it's like the girl. It's like you're dating a girl and she's like, oh, I want that guy. He's like, I want your best friend.
Yeah.
But then the best friend like cheats on her. Is like, oh, now I want you. It's like, no.
If you have any type of pride, like, D'Antoni doesn't have to take this job. But Terry Stotts has already coached a lot of teams. He'll get another chance. They don't have to take this Hornets job. And especially now, after this, I don't think they do. And they have all the leverage. Exact that. And the only way that this situation becomes salvageable or like a blessing in disguise, Michael Jordan better fly a private jet to Utah and get however much money it takes to get Quinn Snyder to coach this team. Because,
it has to, that's the thing. Like, everything shifts. If it's Quinn Snyder, every Hornets fan's like, screw Kenny Atkinson. That was the best thing that happened to us.
Yeah.
Because the Quinn Snyder's the only like home run hire. D'Antoni's now, like, D'Antoni would have been fine if he was the first choice above Atkinson.
Yep. But
now that he was the clear second choice, they already said no to him, and now they're begging for him back. It's an awful situation all around, especially going in. We're 3 days out from the draft. By the time you're listening to this, it is Tuesday or Wednesday, and the draft is 1 or 2 days later.
Yep. And Mitch Kupchak was on record saying, we're going to have a coach before the draft. They did that, and now there's no way. Now there's no way. So
there's going to be like a tweet. It's going to be a Woj bomb, like 9 a.m. It's going to be Hornets have hired Terry Stotts.
Hornets have hired some random no-name coach from the G League.
Just
Bray goes back on an interim deal.
They just bring Paul Silas is back.
Oh my gosh. Steve Clifford has agreed to join the Charlotte Hornets in principle. I don't know. It just looks horrible. And all this uncertainty leading up to the draft, just the worst possible time, if we're being completely honest. And I wonder I would love to know like what the players really think about this. Because I feel like maybe LaMelo's like, whatever, But I feel like maybe some players actually care and they're like, okay, what's going on here?
I don't know. It's weird. And then you have the question of, do you pay Miles Bridges? He's given himself the worst PR in the world right now going into a contract summer.
I can't believe it. He's posted clearly drinking foreign substance on his story. And then you got Montrezl Harrell getting pulled over for 5 pounds of that Mary Jane on the side of the road. It's just – the Hornets is just turning the shambles right now.
Gordon Hayward's no longer top 10 in the world in League of Legends.
They might as well put the Hornets on the Peach Jam tour next year at EYBL, because that's what we're looking like. It's a damn AAU team or something.
We play like an AAU team.
And it's fun to watch.
No defense. Yeah.
If Mike D'Antoni got hired, those games, the over-unders would be 270 for the Hornets.
Yeah, Stanco talked about it, like the old Nuggets teams, like 130 to 115.
It would literally be 140 to 130 every Hornets game.
Real quick, we didn't get to talk about it much with Stanco. Hornets draft 13 picks, 13 to 15. I mean, we talked about it in there too. Mark Williams, we both want Mark Williams. This is if we keep the picks. There's a bunch of rumors flying around that Miles Turner is the Hornets' #1 trade target, would trade those picks, blah, 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 blah. Weird situation with Gordon Hayward's contract. But if we keep those picks, you get to pick 2 guys reasonably in that area. Who do you want the Hornets to take?
First one's Mark Williams, without a doubt. Got to take him. If you keep the picks, you take Mark Williams.
Mark Williams at 13. You don't screw around.
No, even with Kai Jones, you still take Mark Williams. Second pick, I think it's not Sohan. I think a reasonable choice would be like Agbaji. I think is a reasonable second choice.
I think that too. I was going to go with I don't know why I'm blanking here. Tari Eason from LSU.
I also wouldn't be mad at that. But here's the thing. So the question was if we kept the picks. Sure. I don't think we need to keep both these picks because the Hornets are going to do the same thing. They drafted Bouknight at 11 last year, traded up for Kai Jones at 19. Neither of them touched a meaningful minute this season besides the little COVID stretch.
Yeah, they're gonna love the Greensboro Swarm. No disrespect to the Greensboro Swarm. I'm a diehard Swarm fan.
But the value these picks hold. The value these picks hold. The Hornets are diminishing it by not playing these guys. Like Bouknight, imagine what we could have gotten for the 11th and 19th pick last year or whatever it may be. The value is diminishing because the Hornets keep the picks, draft these guys that have potential, and then don't use them. They just waste away in Greensboro. Shout out Greensboro. But I don't think the Hornets need another 2 lottery picks to go do the same thing because it's not paying off.
Yeah, and we're more talking about book night because Kai Jones, it was a project, and we all knew it was a project, and that he needed to be in Greensboro as much as possible. He should have just been playing as the max amount of games he could have in Greensboro. There was no point in leaving him on that Hornets bench. He should have just been getting as much game time as possible. Yeah. And the thing is, I think book night should have played a lot more. I don't think anybody can argue that. But, yeah, the ideal situation, we keep one of the picks. Dream world, we get rid of Gordon Hayward and get Miles Turner, even if we lose the 2 picks.
Yep, 100%. The dream scenario for the Hornets is Gordon Hayward and one of those picks for Miles Turner somehow, and then you keep the other one. But even if it takes both picks, I think you do it. I think you're at that stage right now, especially if you re-sign Miles Bridges, you're clearly in a win-now scenario. LaMelo, 3rd year, Rozier's there. He's only getting older. Like, you have that cast. If you go get Miles Turner, if it takes both lottery picks, then it just happens.
So I texted you about this, like talking about Terry Stotts joining the Hornets. It's just going to be a poor man version of the Blazers because LaMelo playing the Dame role, CJ playing Terry Rozier playing CJ's role.
Yeah.
And Terry Stotts doesn't do it for me.
Like, yeah, the Hornets might win one playoff series in the next 4 years until LaMelo leaves for LA. And that's just not good enough for me.
No.
It doesn't feel like that home run hire.
I like it's D'Antoni, right?
In a perfect world, yes, but I doubt Mike D'Antoni. I doubt he comes back to the Hornets. I don't think he'd be willing unless they throw him a bag. But I don't think he'd be willing to be like, okay, sure, I'll come now that Kenny Atkinson didn't work out, so now I'll just come coach the Hornets. Like, that feels weird to me. It just feels grimy. I don't know. I don't like the situation all around. This is a worst case scenario.
Yeah, it is. Anything else?
No, I think that's it. I think it'll be interesting to see what the Hornets do Thursday. I think there's going to be a couple big trade splashes, not necessarily with the Hornets, but just in general, which I'm excited to see. I feel like the all-season is going to be heating up, and then Summer League starts in a couple weeks.
Yeah, Summer League like July 4th week.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Awesome. Well, if you made it to the end of this podcast, thank you. This was a long one, a loaded one. It was a great one. Make sure to check out CarterCast.com, the YouTube channel, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. You know the whole deal. At CarterBA, at Connor_Sparrow, at CarterCast. And we will see y'all right after the draft. We'll do it right after the draft. We'll be on Friday. And we'll see you then. Bye.